Senior BJP leader Subramanian Swamy has just tweeted saying that Lanka has agreed to release the 5 Indian fishermen. That's the big breaking news that's coming in. We, of course, on NewsX has been tracking this very, very closely. We have Mr. Subramanian Swamy with us over the telephone line. Good morning to you, Mr. Swamy. You've just tweeted saying that Sri Lanka is all set to release 5 Indian fishermen. Can you confirm this for us? So what sort of negotiations have really taken place between Prime Minister Modi and Rajapaksa government?
Well, I didn't say Sri Lanka is going to release them. I said they are going to invoke the transfer of sentenced persons on the basis of that agreement, bilateral agreement of 2010, to an Indian jail where they could either be, the sentence could be carried out, or if they have certainly an appeal, because this is the judgment of a single judge. So there's a division bench of the High Court still available, and finally Supreme Court. So they could go through the Indian legal process. So I think I based it on the sources in Sri Lanka. And they told me this morning that a telephone conversation had taken place between the two, both the president and the prime minister, and that the papers would be processed for this. So it would be incorrect to say that. Sri Lanka would release them. But it's correct to say that they would hand them over to India.
When are they expected to come, according to you, sir? Is this an official confirmation we are looking at from the Indian administration side, sir? Is this an official confirmation?
I don't know. Well, I got it from the Sri Lankan side, which is, I would say, about as authentic as they come. But I have not got it from, I've not asked nor got it from the Indian side, because I had no reason to doubt the veracity of the Sri Lankan source.
Okay, so you mentioned that they have spoken on the phone yesterday, and to process the papers and transfer these 5 Indian fishermen. According to you, sir, how long do you think this process could take?
This would take about 2 weeks, and I would be in Sri Lanka on the 24th for 3 days.
Okay. All right. Mr. Swamy, if you could just I request you to stay on the phone line, because we're also being joined by Mr. Elango, National Fishermen Association Chairman. Mr. Elango, we have Dr. Subramanian Swamy with us over the telephone line, who has just tweeted that these 5 Indian fishermen who have been convicted in Sri Lanka are all set to come to the country on terms and conditions, and papers are being processed at this point in time. Your first reaction on that, Mr. Elango?
Yes. This is a welcome effort.
Yes.
But our fishermen's demand is that the Prime Minister of India should talk to the President of Sri Lanka to withdraw the cases against these innocent fishermen. Our thing is not going to appeal or bringing these fishermen.
Well, that's for the courts to decide, really, Mr. Elango, because as Mr. Swamy is telling us, they will come to the country, which is India, and perhaps the courts in India can take this case forward. So it's upon the courts to decide whether they are guilty or not. So at least some part of your fight for these fishermen is going through, because they will be coming back to the country.
Okay, it's a welcoming decision. I'm welcoming their efforts.
Yes.
But our main demand is the cases should be withdrawn.
Yes.
And because they are innocent, according to the Government of India's investigation.
Okay, just stay with us, Mr. Elango. Just stay with us, Mr. Elango, because I'm sure Dr. Subramanian Swamy can throw some more light on this demand that you're setting for. Dr. Subramanian Swamy, this demand of withdrawing the cases altogether, where these are related to drug peddling and etc. Do you think that's a possibility after all?
Well, Mr. Elango does not know the law. The law is, once the conviction is handed out, there's no question of withdrawing any case. It's the property of the court. They have to go and move the court, saying that the new evidence has come which shows that the original conviction was flawed, and so it may be reconsidered. So this is not Tamil Nadu Assembly that you can pass any resolution you like, including the ridiculous one of withdrawing cases against those who killed Rajiv Gandhi.
Right.
So this is a court of law, and the Sri Lankans are quite ferocious about protecting their reputation as a democratic country. Whether they are not in the eyes of some or not, it doesn't matter. But the procedure, even in India, is nobody can go to and withdraw the case. For instance, the case which convicted for Jayalalitha recently. No, central government cannot go and tomorrow say that we are withdrawing the case, or I go to the court as a complainant and say, no, I'm not pressing my complaint anymore. Now it's become a property of the court.
Right.
And therefore, you should read some law before passing such comments.
Okay. And also, Dr. Swamy, could this be considered as a huge victory for India? Why? Because at least these 5 Indian fishermen are coming back. We've seen the kind of protests and voices being raised by you and, of course, the other regional parties in Tamil Nadu as well.
First of all, let us get the government of India to comment on this Sri Lankan source, which I have conveyed through my tweet. I myself have not made a public statement yet, but have alerted my Twitter followers to this possibility, this happening, and it is based on impeccable sources in Sri Lanka. So once the Indian government confirms it, then I will say to the Indian government, thank you, because the original idea was mine instead of going appeal, because the original idea of the government of India was to go appeal on behalf of the convicted prisoners in the High Court division bench. But that's inappropriate. It should be tried in India,
right?
And for which there was an agreement which very few people knew, and almost all your anchors did not know about it, particularly Arnab Goswami.
Right.
And therefore, now I brought to light this existence of this treaty, and this is the way to amicably settle between our two countries.
Absolutely. Well, that is that treaty we are looking at, through which these fishermen can come back to the country, and of course the courts can look into the matter thereafter. But some sort of victory there that's really coming in once this confirmation comes in, like you're pointing out. Dr. Swamy, thanks very much indeed for speaking with us. Let me just go back to Mr. Elango. Mr. Elango, you heard what Dr. Subramanian really had to say. Your response to that, because the courts have to step into the matter. These 5 Indian fishermen have been convicted. It's not so simple after all.
No, Mr. Subramanian Swamy is a very knowledgeable person in our country. I respect his version. But before coming to India for the swearing-in ceremony, Mr. Rajapaksa only told that the cases will be withdrawn and these 5 people will be released. Because of that only, even that time also, that this case was there in the court. Even after there, Mr. Rajapaksa only told that they will be released. That's why we are asking the same thing. Rajapaksa, as the president of India, president of Sri Lanka, he is having a lot of power. With that power, he can withdraw the case and release these persons, because the Tamil Nadu government as well as the government of India came to understand that these people are very innocent fishermen. They have not gone for narcotic testing. They only went for fishing. This is not my opinion. This is the opinion of the government of India. Even the Salman Kuchit...
But Mr. Elango, we just heard Dr. Subramanian Swamy say that what the Indian government was going to do was actually go ahead and contest this case in the higher court in Lanka itself. But the fact is that at least now, because of the pressure that has built on the government and of course the intervention over here, we're seeing that at least Prime Minister Modi did speak to President Rajapaksa, and under the treaty signed between these two countries in 2010, these fishermen can be tried on Indian soil. At least they'll be back in India where the entire case is concerned. So perhaps we can congratulate on this partial victory for these 5 Indian fishermen who've been languishing there.
Whether the Sri Lankan president accepted for this plea, whether the Prime Minister Narendra Modi's plea, whether the president of Sri Lanka accepted for the plea, I would like to know from you.
Well, this is what Dr. Subramanian has just tweeted as of now. The official confirmation from the government hasn't come yet, but he's telling us that he's got this information from sources there in Sri Lanka, and the government is yet to make an official confirmation. The government will pick this up and perhaps let us know on what really is happening.
Let us get the official thing from the government of India.
Okay. All right, Mr. Elango.
We are congratulating Dr. Swamy's efforts.
Okay. All right, Mr. Elango, thanks very much for speaking with us for the moment. Let me also bring in my colleague Lokpriya, who's joining us from Chennai. Lokpriya, the past 1 week we saw how pressure was really mounting there. Several of these regional parties coming together and asking for intervention from the centre when it comes to the case of these 5 Indian fishermen. Subramanian Swamy just tweeting as of now that the paper process of transferring these 5 Indian fishermen who have been convicted in Sri Lanka has begun. So perhaps these 5 Indian fishermen could come back home anytime soon.
Well, it is a long-drawn legal process, and there is a provision which was signed between India and Sri Lanka in 2010,
yes,
which allows the prisoners in India to be in Colombo to be repatriated back to India, and they can either serve their prison term here. So we have to now wait for the official source from the MEA to confirm this news. If that is the case, then it would take about anywhere between 2 to 3 weeks for this entire legal process to finish. Remember, we are being told that either today or tomorrow there will be a review petition that will be filed in the Lanka against this verdict by the High Court there in Sri Lanka.
Right. Also, Lokpriya, so far, of course, we are breaking this news. Have you been able to gather any sort of reactions from the players in Tamil Nadu, all the political parties who were agitating on the streets up until very recently?
Well, yes, the political parties here in Tamil Nadu maintain that these fishermen are innocent and the cases against them is fabricated and politically motivated. So what they want is Narendra Modi government to talk to Sri Lanka's President Rajapaksa and make sure that these fishermen are freed. So that is their ultimate demand. So now we need to wait and see what they would have to say for this recent development.
Okay, Lokpriya, I request you to stay on the phone line, please. We are getting experts over the telephone line for their perspective and inputs. We have Ms. Sudha Ramalingam, lawyer and activist, joining us over the telephone line. Ms. Sudha Ramalingam, the latest input suggesting that these 5 Indian fishermen who have, of course, been convicted in Lanka could perhaps come home, and under the treaty of 2010 that was signed between Sri Lanka and India. How do you see this case proceeding, and how much time do you think it can take for them to come back? Because there is a huge legal process now we are looking at.
It's a very welcome news. In fact, advocates in Chennai are actually boycotting courts also today for this particular issue. I suppose the government should take up speedy decisions, ensure that they come out as fast as possible.
Right, but Mr. Ramalingam, where these treaties between these two countries are there, of course, voices are coming in that these cases have to be withdrawn. The fact is that they have been convicted. They have been convicted in Sri Lanka. When they come back to the country, of course, they have to be under the scrutiny of the courts in the country, whether or not these cases can be withdrawn or not, and what's the process forward, isn't it?
Definitely. The law will take its course. You cannot simply throw out cases which have been posted against them. But definitely justice would prevail.
Okay, Mr. Ramalingam, thanks very much indeed, saying that the law will take its own course on this matter. Let me also bring in our colleague Sumit Nagpal, who is joining us from the Apex Court. Sumit, the latest inputs now coming in on the case of these 5 Indian fishermen, that they could perhaps come home soon, but yet this under the treaty between Sri Lanka and India, the paperwork has already begun. It could take about 2 to 3 weeks, but of course the case will continue when it comes against these fishermen in India.
See, you have to understand this thing, that the treaty between India and Sri Lanka means that clearly if some offence has been committed by Indian nationals in Sri Lanka or in the territory of Sri Lanka, in those cases, these people can be brought to justice, but they can be brought to justice on Indian soil. So clearly they will be brought back to India, but yes, they will have to undergo the sentence which has been awarded by the Sri Lankan court. So clearly this is an understanding between the two countries, and I hope that Sri Lankan government would honor this particular treaty, and these fishermen might be brought back to India to serve their sentences. So clearly one hope is there that yes, they can be brought back, but at the same time they will have to undergo the sentence which has been awarded by the Sri Lankan court. So in the days to come we might see some kind of a hope between the among the in fact families of these fishermen. So clearly we can only hope for the best, but let's see how it proceeds.
Absolutely.
Now.